Okay, we'll make a start without Tony. He'll be here in a moment. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Strong Communities Select Committee. My name's Jane Pratt, and I'm the elected representative for Llanelli Hill, Gilwan and Clydach, and chair of this committee.
Nicola Perry, Democratic Services.
Roger Hoggins, Head of Operations.
Carl Tewig, Head of Eastern Street Services.
Laura Carter, Senior Technical and Business Officer, Waston Street Services.
Councillor Roger Harris, Chrysolyn Ward, Abergavenny, and member of this committee.
Val Smith, member of this committee, Llanbadach Ward.
Good morning, I'm Mayor Van der member for Tynedon St Albans and Vice Chair of this committee. Thank you.
County Councillor Lisa Dimmock and member of this committee.
County Councillor Tony Easton, member for Dewstall, member of this committee.
Thank you all very much. And do we have any apologies for absence this morning?
Yes, Chair, we've had apologies from County Councillor Guppy, Councillor Jones and Councillor Roden.
Thank you very much indeed. Any declarations of interest, or we'll take them as and when? So we move on to agenda item number 3, which is the public open forum. And we do have a member of the public present, Mr. Sutherland. Good morning. And would you like to address the committee?
Thank you very much indeed for the opportunity to do so. Peter Sutherland, representing Llanbadach Community Council. Just two fairly minor issues this morning. Firstly, we've been looking towards Usk Island Car Park, having the barrier there moved down towards the road. We've put in, with Monmouthshire County Council's help, some good security measures there already. We think moving the barrier down to the road, not a significant issue, but we think would help reduce the nefarious activities that go on in the car park still. Second point, at the last meeting, I felt we were promised a meeting on speeding in Woodside. Mr. Vincent from Shire Newton was here, I was here, and we'd be interested to know what progress is being made on holding those meetings. Speeding through Woodside and in the county, as you know, is a very, very serious issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairman. The moving the barrier, I called in and looked at the site, and I remember why we put the barrier where it is. It was to allow 2 or 3 parking spaces when the barrier was down, so as individuals could still park off the highway, even when we'd closed the main car park. So that was the intention behind it. If there's a view that should be changed, then that can be arranged. But I'd have to say, at the moment, members, that isn't likely to be a high priority in terms of the highway budget. But that is why it was placed where it was. It was a conscious decision to put it back there to allow a handful of spaces when the main car park was closed. As regards the meeting, I apologise. The meeting has been arranged with Mr. Vincent. Councillor Jones is meeting with him. It's actually today. I will make the arrangements with Councillor Sutherland to meet with Llanbadach as well.
Thank you very much indeed, Roger. Councillor Smith?
Yes, regarding the barrier, there was another reason as well. There was a concern about traffic sort of trying to turn in, finding it couldn't, and then you've got vehicles sort of straddled across the road, because people do not go into Woodside at 30 miles an hour. They got their foot down and they're going. So there's a safety concern as well that I still think needs to be considered. Any speed meeting, I think, would be very good to achieve. And I'm not quite sure what Mr. Vincent is pursuing now, but I know that he's achieved a considerable reduction in speed in his area.
Members may recall that Mr. Vincent presented views on the draft speed management and road safety strategy, given his interest, and it was broader than simply around speeding issues in his area. Councillor Jones did offer him the opportunity to meet separately. That's explicitly around that. we're not offering every community council the opportunity of an individual meeting, but we meet with Councillor Sutherland and Baddock Community Council about issues within their community anyway. We would offer that opportunity to any community council, and we do, but we're not about to take the draft road safety and speed management strategy around every community council, but this is in relation to Llanbaddock.
Thank you, Roger. Mr. Sutherland, did you want to come back at all on the responses that you've...
Could I just very briefly on the barrier, and I'm pleased to hear the progress on the road safety, look forward to that meeting. And I have to say I was part of the original decision, I think, in terms of the placement of the barrier. The evidence since that is that there are very few, if any, cars that go in there to use those spaces. If they do, it's at night. And we wonder what activity is going on in those cars. We suspect there's drug dealing. We won't go over there and try and intervene, of course. The second issue is that the provider of the burger van would be willing to, he gets there about 7 or 7:30 in the morning, he would be willing to open the barrier if there were any cars that wanted to get in. I take on board what's been said about the safety issue, but I think we mustn't run away with the idea that those spaces at the front of the car park are regularly used. They are not, and that's really the reason, the raison d'etre, if you like, we were wanting to take the point about it not being a high priority, but the evidence is there that we would lose very little, in our opinion, by moving the gate to the roadside.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Sutherland. I mean, your points have been very valid and very well made, and I'm sure that Roger will get back to the Community Council in due course with solutions. Yeah. So thank you very much. You're very welcome to stay if you'd like to. Thank you very much for attending this morning. So we now move on to the main purpose of our meeting today, Waste and Street Services Policy Review. And this is, a very important meeting this morning. And as elected members, we have a real opportunity here to contribute and shape this policy, which is very much in draft form. So I'd like to ask Carl and Laura to present. Are you both presenting, or is it Carl? Are you presenting, Carla?
I'll do the preamble. Laura's going to do all the technical questions.
Okay, thank you very much indeed.
As the councillor said, the policy is in a very draft format. Most of the policy decisions are part of what we already do, so we already have a lot of this in the background. What we don't have is it as a formal policy. So on the odd few occasions when we're challenged for a policy, we don't have something in place to point to. So that's what we're trying to do, is to formalise some of these already ad hoc ideas that we have and policies in the background that we have. So the missed collections policy of not going back if people haven't put their bin out on time is something that we already do, but it's not formalised as such yet. We are bringing in-cab systems into the vehicles, which will help with a lot of these issues, and we've put some slides together in your pack so you can see what the in-cab looks like. The in-cab obviously sits in front of the vehicle. When the boys pull up outside the property, they can mark down if there's any issues: blocked access, contamination, bins not presented. Any number of issues can be flagged up on the system, fed back in real time to the contact centre. So if residents then phone in, the contact centre can give them real time answers. So this is what is happening outside your house right now, or did happen outside your house at 9 o'clock this morning. And so that's a very good way for the customer, the resident, to get that kind of level of detail of information. So, but on the back of that, we would like to have some firmed up policies of what we're going to do with that information. So, as I said, it's in draft and we're working through it. The assisted collections is another area that's in draft at the moment. Lots of councils have looked at how they implement this, whether it's through some very stringent rules around length of drive, length of walk, type of surface. Is there any dogs in the garden? Those kind of things. They mark them down and got a bit of a matrix and then come up with whether we will provide an assisted collection. We are all getting older, all of us. We're all living longer. Monmouthshire is a very rural county, it is getting more difficult to provide these assisted collections where we have long walks and long drives into the country. Built up rural, urban areas, very simple. It's usually a walk up a path, up a couple of steps to the back door, pick the bags up, empty them, take them back up for the resident. Very simple, very helpful for residents who are infirm or disabled or can't manage. When we're out in the countryside, it becomes a lot more difficult. And do we have a two-tier system for people who live out in the country and people who live in urban areas? And these are some of the things that we're testing and trying to get overcome as well, and some of the points that I would like you to help us with to firm up what we're going to do on policy decisions going forward. One of the other areas that we want to look at is the garden waste collections. The policy was brought in when the garden waste collection policy was brought in, so it hasn't changed. But we planned on issuing 2 permits free of charge to places of worship and community groups and volunteers. At the time, very good idea, encourage people to look after their own little patch. That's grown exponentially. There's now around between 100 and 150 groups or individuals on that list. Most want two bags. Lots are asking for up to 10. If we gave that amount out, the council is potentially lose, if everybody has 2 bags, we're losing around £4,000 worth of income. If everybody had 10 bags, you can see where that's starting to go, is thing. And as we, as a council, try to encourage more volunteers, it's the right thing to do. At the same time, we're trying to encourage more income. Where did that rub stop? And we support our communities and our volunteers before we think about money, and we'd just like to firm that up in the policy as well. So this is an opportunity for all of you to feedback. We'll take notes. We'll try and form more of the policy in this meeting. We're more than happy to bring it back to Strong Community Select, or if you feel that we've captured enough of the information, we can take it to the cabinet member then for approval. But we'll take your advice on that as well.
Thank you very much indeed, Carl. I mean, there's a lot of questions that members have got. Can you just give us a little bit more detail on the cost of that garden waste system and how much income we get from it, and a little bit more meat on the bones as to the costings?
So the garden waste permit at a resident level is £18 per permit. So that's what we charge. We bring in around around £270,000, I think it is, at the moment on that service. That covers the cost of collection based on the vehicles that we have out there at the moment. The more people that come onto the system, the less our cost, but the further we travel to collect them. So it's a very difficult thing to say it's only covering our collection costs or is fully covering our collection costs, because it changes every year to the number of permits that we sell. But we've worked out that will more or less within 10 grand cover our collection costs. That's what we can charge for. We can't charge for disposal of the material. The council picks up that cost. But in reality, we would pick up that cost anyway, because people would bring it to the household waste recycling centres. So it brings in substantial funding, but only pays to deliver the service. As we deliver more services to the community and volunteer groups and churches and chapels and cemeteries and other places like that, the cost of the service goes up. The cost of that service is then borne by the people who pay for the permits. And I can't imagine anyone in the county disagreeing with giving some free permits to some people, but I'm not sure that's felt across all of the community groups and all of the churches and chapels and cemeteries that we provide services to free of charge, and that's what we would like some guidance from members with.
Okay, so if we're doing the middle one first, but I think whilst we're on this point, we'll look at the garden waste, because there's 4 recommendations and the garden waste one is number 2. If I could invite Councillor Dimmock to ask her question. Thank you.
On the churches and chapels, do we have a cost of the garden waste for them alone at the moment that we could look at? Because obviously you're talking about the 10 bags. I know that Jeremy Harris from Mega Church contacted Waste and Disposal because they used to have 5 bags per church, and now they're getting 2 bags free. Obviously, churches haven't got a large income coming in, and obviously maybe we need to work with the community councils or town councils helping the churches with that. Obviously, listening to your points that you just raised, it's made me not make some points that I was going to make. So yeah, would you be able to get that cost for us to have a look at?
We know the cost of each permit. As I said, within quite close is we need to bring in roughly £18 per permit to provide the service. So if a church wants 5 permits, it's costing us roughly £90 to deliver that service. It's very difficult, you know, if the church in Lantony Valley wanted the service, that's a very different cost to a church in the middle of Caldicot wanting the service, purely on where we drive. But we have to, you know, we have to look at the broad thing. I think we would be happy to look towards community councils and to see if we could give a number of permits to community councils and they can issue them out to volunteers and churches as they see fit. But we need to have an idea of what level of money county councils are willing to support us to give away free. When we first did it, we were expecting 20 to 30 groups. We now are averaging between 100 and 150. It's just grown much more than, which is great from a voluntary perspective. You know, we've got more volunteers doing more for us, but there is a cost implication on that.
Did you want to come back at all, Councillor Dimmock? Now I'll take Councillor Webb's question.
What will be the next step then of communicating with the community councillors and town councils?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very important point because I'm a community councillor and we deal with things like dog waste and, you know, anyway at the moment. And I mean, that is a real problem for us, actually, dog waste at the moment, because there's one person picking it up and he's, you know, there's issues around that. But I think it's a natural thing that community councils, they know their area, they know where the garden waste collections are required. So do you think we could work on that, Carl?
We'll be more than happy to build this into the policy from our side. That makes more sense. We've been asked by lots of groups for bags. Some are cutting a very small patch outside their own property. They're keeping that lovely to within, you know, grass to within an inch of its life. But that isn't actually what this was. This isn't what this was put in place for. But we don't have the resources or time to travel around the whole county seeing what these smaller groups are doing, and some of them are with individuals. So getting that feedback from community councillors would be fantastic for us. We're happy to build that into this.
Thank you. So we'll take that forward. Councillor Webb and then Councillor Eason.
I was just wondering, Chairman, thank you. Town and community councils have the right to give money towards the upkeep of churchyards, and they should be looking towards that. I would suggest that all community and town councils up the figure that they give to churches for the upkeep of the graveyard, because this is what it's about. And they have, in their policy, they have to give, if requested, money to the churchyards for upkeep.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And I mean, maybe we should be communicating this through area committees and, you know, getting community councillors along so that we can have this conversation. Do you, would you like to respond to Councillor Webb's point there?
Obviously, as the head of service for the service area, I would much prefer if the churches were given money to pay for the service off us. That makes life much easier for me. What I do know is that, you know, churches very easy, chapels, those kind of places, quite easy to do in that way, and we would welcome that. It's the volunteers and the smaller individuals that are doing a little bit that perhaps we still need to give a certain number to community councils so that they can give out to the community champions.
Thank you. So if I can now take Councillor Eason's, then Councillor Harris and then Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. This raises a question in my mind about the whole policy of Monmouthshire County Council, how they deal with particular charities or bodies of voluntary nature. We're talking about a specific matter here, but across the patch, you find that different parts of the environment or within our section will apply different views on how charities work. I totally support the need to help charities and churches the best we can. And as Councillor Webb says, yes, community councils have the ability to precept amounts for churches and things like that. So I think whilst we're talking about this as a policy within waste collection, garden collection, we need really to look at the matter of policies across the patch, because they're different. As Roger, I could allude to Roger about another matter I got where I think people are being treated differently, and we should have a policy equally. But taking the point that you've made about who you deal with, who you support, do you support charities? Or this is the point I'm trying to make: is where's the line drawn on all this, and who do you support? When do you support them? What are the criteria? For example, if I turn myself into a community interest company, in my own right as a county councillor, could I have my waste bags collected free?
Thank you, Councillor, for that question. I think what we're trying to do is firm up these policies for us as well. It's those kind of questions that we are struggling with. When do we stop supporting it because, you know, the charity is too big? The charity's got enough money to pay towards these things. That's the issues that we're struggling with, and that's what we want to build into a policy. It's not going to be hard and fast. We have to have some areas that we can work within, but it's those types of questions that we are struggling with as well. If you set up a community interest group that is looking at doing gardens for people, no, I would suggest, no, we can't afford to give you permits. If you are setting up a community interest group to look after a very small orchard, then I think it'd have to be a public orchard, but yes, I think we could look at that, but I would rather do that with the community council so that there's a bit more local feeding into it, rather than us trying to make decisions from Raglan on, is this the right way to go? So these kind of issues we would like to build into a policy without over bureaucratising the policy itself, because it could become very long-winded. So,
are you happy with that, Councillor Easton? Yeah. So if I can now take... sorry, yeah, certainly.
Yeah, the point I would make a reflection upon what Carl said and what Councillor Easton said. There are charities and charities. Your main streets are full of charities, generating lots of recyclates, maybe waste, I don't know. I'm not sure how it's managed. Well, I got a rough idea how it's managed, and they take it away and they use it in different ways. But we need to be careful that we don't start opening unanticipated floodgates by saying we're going to do this, that or the other. Policy, Carl's right, you need a little bit of flexibility within it, and I would suggest officers with members try to achieve that anyway. But to write a policy which is too broad may leave you open to lots of problems. And I was quite taken by the comments which both yourself, Madam Chairman, and Councillor Webb, that actually in instances like this the town and community council can support the church or whatever if they think they are closer to that community than we are. So our policy could be quite standard, but then allow the town and community council to reflect any change they wish to make by supporting or not that community. They are closer to it than we are. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as a county councillor, I go along to the community council that my ward is part of, and there's an agenda item that asks me as a county councillor what things have happened in the last month, etc., etc. Now, I'm assuming that most of us as county councillors do go along and interact with our community councils in particular. So we could be, in fact, we should be the voice, particularly talking about this problem here, this churchyard problem as one example. So we should be used to disseminate and feed back, disseminate the information, feed back the responses. At least that's the way I look at it. And all in all, we've, just generalising now, we've got all this information in front of us. We are at a point now where there's radical changes out there. And I know we've all had problems, and I'd like to publicly announce out there I sympathise entirely with the crews. What you've done is a massive operation, and this was going to happen. It's steadying out now, and I'm sure you've learnt an awful lot. I think we need what you've learnt to come back to us before we totally finalise this document here, because if we say this is good now, and you come back in 2 months' time and say, look, we've had these problems, we've overcome them now, etc., that should be the final document. That's just what I feel about it. But you know, and I know in my ward, I've only had 2 residents actually come directly on to me. I know from me actually going down to the one-stop shop saying what's happening with my own collection, that they've been inundated, poor devils, and it's obviously reflected back on the crew. So I think in a couple of months' time, everything will be settled down, and you know, we can give you ideas now, but I think I'd prefer if you came back in a couple of months' time, and we can look at the whole lot then.
Yep, that's great, and we can build on and put in what our learning through the recycling review, and hopefully get a much stronger policy and bring it back. There has been several missed collections in the new system. We are getting on top of it now. It is getting better. The phone lines are slowing down. A lot of the learning from that can really help develop this going forward. The in-camp systems are going in now within the next couple of weeks. We would have a time then to see how this works, to build the policy properly and really formalise it. That would be quite good to then bring it back as a policy.
Thank you, Carl. If I can take now a question, and that's a very valid point you made, Councillor Harris, and I think that, you know, we've got to put our views today, but it does need to come back here in a much more succinct form in the future. So if we can now, if I can take questions from Councillor Smith and then Councillor Dimmock.
Yes, a lot of work's gone into this, and I appreciate that, and you're on a steep learning curve. Oh, thank you. Pardon, I'm here. I was saying a lot of work's gone into this, but it does need a bit more work, and some revision, and possibly making it a more concise document. Like Councillor Harris here, I've got my slot on the agenda with my local community councils. And it's interesting, you know, somebody says something and it triggers a thought in your mind. And yes, really looking at supporting charities and such like the small and the small charities, the small groups within communities, that should be a role for the community councils. Building stronger links, you know, the essential ones at the grassroots. Not bringing it to us for the couple of sacks for the local church. This is something that I really think community councils could be enablers. So that's given me a lot of thought about that. Looking at the collection you've been doing, yes, there have been a couple of misses within my area, but it's a learning curve. You've got a whole new system. Moving from garden waste, really, to... I can ask now. Or do you want me to...
if we can stick with garden waste at the moment, and then we'll...
That's
have you got any other comments on garden waste?
I think that putting that thought into my mind, it's something that I shall suggest to the community councils. Look, there are these issues. This is very relevant to the role that I think you could well be performing, and might remove a headache for you.
Yep, I think you'd agree with that. Yeah, I think it's a really good idea to come out of the meeting. Right, I think I had Councillor Dimmock and Councillor Webb, I think. Yeah, okay. Councillor Dimmock, is it still something on garden waste? Yeah. Okay, fine. So have we had all the questions on that we wanted to ask concerning garden waste? Okay, so we'll move on to general collections policy now, which is 2.1. And I know that we've got a lot of questions on this particular aspect. Councillor Smith, did you have something you wanted to ask? Yeah, thank you.
So if we look at page 2, under the heading number 7, the consultation of policies have been created by a working group consisting of both frontline supervision staff, office-based staff and management. But there's been no consultation. Right, no consultation with the users. They've not been involved, and I think that perhaps would have been a good thing to have done. Looking at the general waste collection, it's going to take a lot longer for the operatives to undertake their rounds. I've actually been watching, I know you're on a learning curve, but the actual manoeuvring, and I'm wondering if that's going to impact on the budget, whether operatives are going to say, look, we cannot fulfill this role within our job time. Just a thought, as I say, it's interesting watching things happening. I know they're learning, they've got a new system, so that's all right, they can solve that one there. Time for the collections. One thing I did feel very much about, that we should be providing bags for the residual waste, because you're going to get enterprising people producing great big bags, as well as little bags, and also a variety of different bags. You can't see what's inside, and that can be quite useful. If you can see a stack of tin cans and whatever shouldn't be in there, is in there, it'll make the job easier. So I feel I know it's an additional expense to actually purchase those bags, but I think that it'll balance out with the amount of residual waste that doesn't appear and make people think more clearly. So that was one thought I had, the translucent bags on page 13. I think somebody else is going to ask what happened to our recycling shop. That was proposed quite a long time ago. And I think that would really help. It would draw people to one of our better functioning station, our recycling. There is recycling going on there, compared with that which we're operating down the road, where basically it's tip it into one skip or tip it into the other. And that is a deterrent to recycling. It's too easy. It's too easy because you just chuck it in the one hole. So I really look forward to seeing that happen. There is one personal one, if I can raise, Chairman. I have a voluntary group within my community. They operate what's called the Red Tin Shed. It's operated by a number of mature individuals, some more mature than me. They work extremely hard. This isn't one day a week. They're there 3-4 days a week, sifting through the products that come. Once a month, they have a sale. People actually queue. They raise prodigious amounts of money for charity. They are now having to spend £200 on hiring a skip, because they have been told you can't take your residual or leftovers down to tip in Usk, which I think is regrettable. So this group of hard-working people who raise money for charity, a lot of money, and work huge hours there, and it's hard physical labour as well, I can tell you that, they're now spending 200 quid on a skip. So we've got a skip there now, and guess what? Not only are people dropping off waste bags on sale day and other days, they're dropping them in the skip. So the volunteers are supporting Monmouthshire County Council with their contribution. And I really hope you can find a solution for this. This isn't just a small enterprise. You're talking a lot of money for a variety of charities, whether it's your air ambulance, your St. David's Foundation, whatever. So I do hope some way we can find a policy to cover such situations. This isn't tiddly. To expend huge amounts of your physical effort and your personal time, and then to have to see it spent on hiring a skip to finish the job. Not everything goes there. The charities take away other stuff the following day. So there's a small amount of residual. So I'm very concerned about that one, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smith. And there's just recapping on those main points there. The first one was the issue of the time that's taken to, you know, look at the contaminated waste, separate the waste, put all the information into the new system, etc. So you're concerned about the time and the impact on the budget. Secondly, you'd like to see see-through bags. Thirdly, you want to know what's happened to the shop. And fourthly, you would like to know around the situation with the charity. So,
one, Chairman, as well, because it's something I feel very much. The in-cab system, that's good. And I must be on there so frequently because I rarely have bags out because we don't put them out until they're full. So if I looked at my address, it would be blank, you know, I've never put in my bins out. That's all right. The operatives going round, the cab system that you've got now, can it be used also by the operatives, the driver, to identify other issues as they go around? The potholes, the tipping, the waste. I mean, you've got a really good, you could have an excellent system for reporting issues and sending them straight back in, whether it's tipping, fly tipping, a pothole, a tree that's coming down, whatever else. But thinking of that system, it looks very basic at the moment. It could take a whole lot more possibly.
thank you, Councillor Smith. I think there's at least 5 points there. So if you'd like to come back, Carl.
Yeah, and the consultation with residents we do every 2 years. We have fed consultation out on many options. None of them specifically around the collections policy, but lots of the stuff that we've done on the garden waste policy and questions around that has helped formulate this. So once we've got this in a format that looks something that we can ask questions around in a consultation process, we'll put something out for the residents to come back as well and give their feedback on it. That it does take longer to collect the way we're collecting, but the idea is that we'll separate more materials and get an income stream from their materials to reduce our cost reprocessing. That's hoped long term will negate the cost of the longer separating on the vehicles and bring in income for us. So we know it's going to take longer. We know it's going to slow the crews down. We've hopefully built enough time into the existing rounds, although the last 2 weeks, you know, while we learn the rounds, it doesn't look like that at the moment. But yes, longer term, we should have built enough room into there. The bags for residual waste were taken out 4 years ago now, probably coming up. It was an £80,000 saving. That's what we were spending on bags. There was also the cost of delivery on top. We were probably spending somewhere around £120,000 a year to deliver bags. That you have to get a lot of recycling to recover £120,000 worth of bags. And through the consultation at that time, I'm not saying it'll be different now, but at that time, lots of residents were saying, why are you giving us bags? You need to save money. Why are you doing it? It's harder for us to go and get the bags. We'd just rather buy black bags. So that may have changed. I do take on board the point that giving somebody a smaller bag that is see-through would probably help recycling and would certainly help those jumbo builder bags that we see far too frequently now that are way too heavy for us to lift. One of the policies will be around, you know, if a bag is too heavy to lift, it'll be stickered and marked on the screen as well, because some of the bags now are at the point where we can't lift them. So we need to address that. The recycling shop, you'll be pleased to hear, went in yesterday. It's not open, but it is on the ground and should be open within the next month at Llanfoist. So it was put on site yesterday. We need to wire up the electrics to it. Homemakers have are in the process of signing the SLA to go in and start operating it for us. So I would hope within the next month we'll be up and running in the shop.
Can I just interact on that? Because I know from my retail background that the busiest weekend of the whole year for places like B&Q is Easter weekend. That is when everybody starts clearing out and tidying up their homes. So do you think we can get it open for that?
I'll do my very best to get it open for that. Everybody's on board. Viridor has started collecting items already. We've got 2 sheds on the site now where we're putting items in. If we can, we would love to get it open, even if it's a very basic level open for the Easter bank holidays. Yes, we'll do our best to get it open.
Could you get the chairman to open it for you?
I think there's far more important people than me to open it. Quite a few people wanting to speak. Can you want to speak on this item?
Because I'm a trustee of Homemakers, so it's only a personal interest. I thought we'd better do that.
Fine, you'll fill a form in before. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so you've still got some more questions to answer there, Carl, haven't you? What was the other one? Was the issue about the charity having to buy a skip and actually finding that people are putting other waste in, that's our waste into it.
I'm happy to speak with Councillor Smith after and find out all the details. I don't know the details of the individual charity, but we can look at it. Yeah, no problem at all.
Okay, thank you. Roger?
The other point which Councillor Smith raised was about reporting potholes and dangerous trees and various items along the highway, because they are the one vehicle which will travel across every road at least once a week. There's a lot to be said for that. I doubt if this system would cope with it in terms of time. The crews have got jobs to do. If you start to record potholes, dangerous trees, things such as that, then it's going to slow the process down. And you'd be slowing a driver and 2 down as opposed to just an inspector. That being said, the whole technology nowadays and what it can record, and with GPS telling you exactly where it is, there must be something which we're not doing at the moment, but I have a lot of sympathy with the concept that we should be able to automatically record in some way some problems. The only my reflection upon that is, be careful what you wish for. Once you start reporting all of these problems, you will then be expected to put them right. And that will be a funding matter for the authority.
If I can, some of those problems that could be picked up are not the problem for the council. It's a matter of the public clearing up after itself. For example, the lanes that are strewn with hedge clippings that you can puncture yourself on. Yeah. Those are the responsibility of private individuals who need it. Because in the system, the driver stays in the vehicle all the time. So therefore, we have to give him a nice punch pad that he can just go. So I look to the future.
Thank you. And I've got questions now from Councillor Easton, then Councillor Webb, then Councillor Dimmock.
Thank you, Chair. My experience is the drivers don't just sit in the cabs all the time, to be quite honest. The only problem I've seen at the moment, and I think they get over it, is this rear wheel steering, because they're a bit wider, and I've noticed them a little bit. They'll get over it eventually, but it's just rear wheel steering gives a different ambience on what they're doing. My experience also is the glass collection. There is a tendency at the moment. Well, there's a tendency to get glass on the road gets broken. Of course, something must be cleared up, but not all can be cleared away. So I question the continued use in the future of boxes, because the boxes are also being blown away and smashed by lorries driving over them. I know it has a lesser cost on green boxes than a continuation of a sort of bag, and I would I would hope that when we review this in some period of time, that I would be of the view that maybe we should have the plastic bags for bottles where you wouldn't have the breakage, as you have with the paper and the cans and plastic at the moment. And I think that system works quite well, and the public like it. We're going to go to Hessian type bags in the near future. Perhaps we can go that way, but perhaps we should have a review on how it works in, say, 12 months' time to see whether it is the best way or the original way might have been better. I do believe that a green plastic bag would have been better for glass. I'm not really convinced that emptying the green boxes into the lorry when some fall on the road, and that could be a problem. They've got to clear some of it up, but they can't be there all day sweeping the roads, couldn't they? And the other one, yes, I think enough rubbish. Sometimes they fill the potholes with the rubbish, so you could do that on the way round. That's all I got to say.
Did you have a point to make about contaminated waste and flats and who owns the bags, Tony, in the pre-meeting?
Yeah, I won't show whether there's the right place to raise that up, but I will do. If you put the rubbish out in the morning, who owns that bag? That's the question. My understanding of recent past is that once that bag is put on the side of the road, it becomes the ownership of the local authority who is responsible for whether they take it away or not. And the other one was contamination. How do we resolve the contamination issue if, for example, Oakley Way, you put a sticker on the bag, we don't know where the bag's come from, it's not taken back in. And as you know, I've been involved in sorting out some of these contaminated bags and find that 90% is recyclable. So how do we get over that?
They're very good points. I don't think anyone in the country has worked out how we're going to deal with flats and contamination, these very issues that we've got. What we would like to do is work with the housing providers and set up better areas for people to put their bags and their boxes and their bins in if necessary, and give more separate bins. There will always be an element of society that don't want to recycle and contaminate. Hopefully we can start finding some evidence in those bags and start serving notice on those people. They are a minority, not a majority, and we need to deal with them. The in-cab system will help us do that, because we know where the areas are bad and we go down there doing our bit, but actually capturing the data on you helps us take it to court and get a successful outcome and start prosecuting people, because it's not fair on everyone else. So that's one of the things that we want to look at. I take on board the glass. At the moment, we're not getting a huge amount of reports in of broken glass on the road, but I know it is a concern. And I think as we move forward over the next 12 months, especially when we roll out the polypropylene bags, there's going to be areas where we're going to have to look at different systems of how we collect this material to make it safe for the loaders, for the residents, and for the users around those people and the communities that they live in. So it's a bit of a moving feast, especially on flats. What we've got before, and the reason for not rolling out the polypropylene bags straight away was to give us time to let this bed in, then roll out the polypropylene bags to look at these other areas. Chepstow Town Centre is another one where there's a lot of built-up areas, and we need to understand better how people are putting their waste out and what is the best way of us collecting it. On your question on who owns the bags, the resident owns the bags until we collect them. So if we don't collect them because they've contaminated them, the resident still owns that bag. That's what the Environmental Protection Act would say, is it is the resident's waste up to the point where it's collected by the authority is then our waste to deal with at that point. But up until that point, all we are doing is asking the resident to make it available for us to collect. It is up to the resident then to take it back in at the end of the day if it's not collected through contamination. So,
to come back on the one point you mentioned about flats. Roger got flats as well. We've never really resolved that problem. For example, I should imagine this morning, yesterday morning, there were 3 or 4 black bags and a couple of red bags outside the shops in Oakley Way, and then driving further on down the flats, there are still bags outside the properties there. People are just filling their bags and putting them out, irrespective of the correct time for the collection. I don't actually what day it is on Oakley Way at the moment, because it has changed. But we do need, with the housing provider, which happens to be MHA in this case, to come forward with a method of collecting this stuff in frames, for example, whereby it doesn't get blown around the streets, it doesn't get attacked by dogs. You're not going to stop rats getting in it, but they'll be there. But if people are going to put their rubbish out a lot earlier than they ought to do, we must find a way with the housing provider of corralling the rubbish so it can be taken away at the right time.
I think through the enforcement policy, and that's an area we've got to develop stronger. One, because it's got to be quite a strong policy, but 2, residents need to understand the rules around it. What we want to do is get to a point where residents are not putting out their waste 2 or 3 days earlier. Sometimes, in certain areas, 11, 12 days earlier than they should. That's an issue. We can issue fixed penalty notices on people who do that. we've just got to build up that enforcement policy up to be able to do that. Welsh Government is doing a lot of work around behaviour change and all of these issues to encourage recycling and to encourage the right behaviour for bin collections and recycling collection. So that's a piece of work that we're involved with as well at Welsh Government level. But flats across the country are problematic, and no authority has found the best way of doing it yet. You know, if we manage to do flats right, you're in Monmouthshire, I won't be long in Monmouthshire, I'll be headhunted by every other authority in the UK. So yeah, hopefully we get to that point quite quickly.
Just come back on a brief comment. It's not convenient for all county councillors, but I find the convenience of being able to go talk to Dave Tucker anytime I got a problem. I go talk to Dave, as you've seen. I met you down there, and it does help to have that relationship. But it's not the same ability for like Jane, who's in the middle of nowhere up in Llanfydd Hill, to get down to Llanffoes, for example. It's just down the road for me. So there is ability for myself to move that forward with your staff.
Thank you. If I can now take questions from Councillor Webb, then Councillor Dimmock, then Councillor Smith.
Thank you.
Sorry, it was Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chairman. Excellent news about the shop. I mean, in the past, this is going back to years and years ago, I've had some really good chairs and reupholstered them, and I'm really, really pleased about that. Thank you very much indeed. I think it's quite a good thing that perhaps the chairman could open the site. I mean, we'd give it a bit of publicity at some stage or other, perhaps not on that day, but at some stage to give it a bit of publicity. Another thing, we always talk about black bags. Can you get see-through bags from supermarkets and things? I mean, perhaps people might be encouraged to use see-through bags, but I don't know that you can actually buy them. I don't know. We always talk about black bags. Why can it not be see-through bags instead of black bag policy? I don't know. I don't know. Just something to think about, perhaps. Perhaps it's not a goer. Right, that was that. The purple bags, the recycling bags, the purple and the pink bags, why can't you take those to the site sometimes? If you miss a collection, you have to keep them for the next time. Why can you not take them to the waste sites, please? And has there been a big request for the smaller bins for glass? Has that cost a lot of money to provide those, or has there been a lot of requests for them with the handles for rural areas, whatever? Thank you very much. Thank you, Carl, and thank you both, Lisa and Carl, for all you're doing. Thank you. And, of course, Roger.
Okay, would you like to come back on those points?
Because we ask residents to buy their own bags, I think it would probably be difficult to ask them to buy clear bags. They are available, but they are more expensive. I wasn't here at the time, but the suggestion of the first rollout was for clear bags, and everybody said that they didn't want clear bags because they didn't want to see what might be put in a rubbish bag that they didn't want everyone else to see. So there's a little bit of discretion on that side of it. The purple and red bags at the HWRCs, so the household sites, the difficulty is lots of people bring the bags in that are contaminated as an almost get out of jail free card. They just bring them in and then want to chuck them into the recycling, and that causes problems for us on our site. It is something we really want to develop and get a better system to do it, because there are genuine miscollections. The people are willing to help us out to bring the bags to the sites, and we don't have a system to let them do it. So that's something we desperately want to work on now and get better at. Whether there's some kind of honesty thing where you say, yes, the bag was stickered and it goes into residual waste, and no, it wasn't stickered, I'm genuinely late, and we just have to trust that. It's something that we'd like to do. It's not something we're going to be able to offer at all the sites. It would only be able to be offered at Llanffoes and 5 Lanes, because they're our bulking station. So we couldn't offer that facility at Esco, Troy. Not at the moment, no. And the smaller bins, we've had around 600 bin requests for bins. We bought 4,000. We were expecting it, so it was built into we bought enough boxes to give out and enough bins if people wanted the smaller bins. So we're not running out. We've got plenty there. Most people, when they've requested one, we've said to them, can you just manage for a week or two, see how it is? Most people then say, that's fine. The boxes are not as big as we thought. We've seen some very strange things on Facebook with children climbing into the bins to show how big the boxes are. There was a 9-year-old in one of the boxes. I'm still not sure to this day what it proved, but yeah, they could get a 9-year-old in the box. So yeah, not sure. So, but yeah.
Okay, are you happy with those responses? Yeah. Councillor Dimmock and then Councillor Harris.
Just on the new system rollout, I just wanted to praise you, because obviously any change, and I think we all know this as councillors, there's always going to be a bit of a backlash. I think it was managed really well. Like, I was questioning, when are we going to send out the leaflets, because I was getting inundated. But I think now, looking back, the timing was perfect. I still haven't got my collections. I recently moved house. I'm still not right. But it's okay. I'll just wait till the next time. I think you've done a great job. And I thank you and your team for that. And I did say in the pre-meeting, obviously I've been speaking to some of your operations on the ground, and I think it would be nice if they could one or two could come along and maybe share their experiences. Although I know you're that in-between gap, getting to hear and speak, I'm friends with one of them, I didn't realise he actually worked in operations, is interesting listening to his ideas and things that they're hearing off residents, and I think that'd be nice to welcome them, because it's important. They are important. They do a great job. You know, I can remember reading bankers went on strike. No one really cared years ago in Ireland. Binmen go on strike. The whole world's in chaos. You know, so they're really important. So I'd like to see one or two coming in, taking it in turns. Just quickly though, just from personal experience, when I was shopping in Tesco's, because you're talking about these extra large bags, I can remember picking up bags and then getting home and I could literally fit a body in it if I wanted to. Not that that's going to happen. What is the standard size? Is it 60 litres? Or, because I know we've done all these great marketing leaflets, but there's no size of the bags. So I just wondered, you know, is something we can promote as councillors, you know, to try and, you know, deter people from buying those bigger sacks?
Okay, thank you very much for not shouting at me for missing your collections. You are the first. The bags that we've got, the idea of bringing crews in, that would be great. We would love to have frontline representation when we bring this policy back to you. A lot of the policy has been built around their views, so we did a big training session with all the staff. Their views came over quite strongly that one of the things that really upsets them is when they go past the property and the bin isn't out, and then we make them go back there for a missed collection. They know that bin wasn't out when we send them back to pick up contaminated bags, although they've stickered them. There's not huge amounts of them, but these are the things that really upset them and take off them, you know, is a morale destroying thing. So getting someone in off the front line sounds like a really good idea. It's enlightening to us as well, you know, so that would be a great idea. The black bags that you normally would buy, they range from 60 to 80 litres is the kind of bag that we expect people to put out. That's the size of it. What we're seeing is the big 140 litre wheel bin bags. So, you know, when they fill them to the brim, it's a wheel bin. It's not something that our crews can lift up. So we take as much as we can, but we have to start firming up because it's causing it's causing injury to workers and collection crews. So. And this is the reason for a lot of this policy stuff, is just to have it firmed up and formalised. That this is the size bag that is reasonable. You can, we collected some from, you know, particularly around the Llanelli area on the weekend, and a lot of people fill them with ashes. It doesn't happen so much in the towns, but out in the areas, a lot of people put ashes into the bags. Even small bags then become very heavy very quickly. So it's just understanding for the policies. Hope that the residents will read the policy and realise that our crews can't do everything. They need a bit of support from the residents as well, and that's what we're trying to get over in this policy.
Thank you, Councillor Dimmock. And, you know, I echo your points exactly, and I think it would be a brilliant idea to have the crews back to this committee. And also, you know, as councillors, we are all very concerned about the welfare of the staff, because they do such an important job, and it's not acceptable for people to have, you know, back injuries and things because they're trying to lift bags that are too large. That's got to change. So
and I think when you can relate to a person actually having to do that job, I think it's just a little bit more insight, and I think we'd understand it a bit clearly.
thank you very much. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll be going back over one or two points already been mentioned. It's interesting, on page 12 of the bundle, what can you expect from the council in relation to your waste collections? One of them, our operatives will be polite and courteous during their collections. And it stops there, and it should continue and should expect the same from residents. And I think it's absolutely vital that that goes in. We just said how, you know, how good they are, and they probably get loads and loads of abuse going around. And it does, no matter what, people might say it doesn't affect me, but it will. It will. It cannot possibly not affect people. So they deserve to be treated courteously as well. That should definitely be in there. And I think it should be in red and highlighted. Going back to, again, I've got loads of flats in my ward. There are only a few residents that abuse it, but they cause mayhem to the ones that abide by the system and the residents around. So sooner or later, if they don't comply, we've got to do something about them. I think it might take a bit of time. They've all got, in the flats that I know of, they've all got their own outside bays, if you like, with doors on that they can they can put stuff in. So that I know living in flats is difficult, but they have got this outside area where they can take their stuff, and it's really a matter of laziness, and I can't be bothered that it doesn't happen. So sooner or later, we cut them some slack, but sooner or later, that's going to have to stop, I think. Regarding black bags, this might be controversial, but could we, as an authority, buy them, if you like, more cheaply than people can buy them in supermarkets, etc., at the correct size, say 80 litres, and sell them back to the public at cost, or with, you know, slightly more than cost? That might be a bit controversial, but it'd be interesting to know what you think about that. So that's me. I just got one question on the recycling performance, by the way, on page 11. There's a couple of years where it's dipped, and 17-18 was one. Is it just that's the way it is, or were there any particular reasons why? We're still above target, but it had dipped. Any info?
Thank you very much, Councillor Harris, for those very valid points. Would you like to come back, Carl?
Yeah, we will build up on what the crews should be able to expect, and what we should be able to expect from the public as well. The size of the bags, how heavy it is, and the public being courteous, parking courteously. It would be a really good start on collection day. That would be something nice to help their communities. That would be a good place to start. So the flats, as you said, and you know, I've said many times in these meetings, we don't. It's a very difficult one to tackle. Not all flats have outside space, so we understand there are issues there. But it's not only flats; it's quite a lot of households that are not doing the right thing, and we don't want to we don't want to go at people just because they live in flats, because it's not only their issue, lots of households cause problems as well. So we need to address all of that. The black bags we can look at. We can certainly buy them cheaper as a council than the public could in shops. How we sell those back out, given that the community hubs would probably be the place to sell them. I'm not the one-stop shops. I'm not sure how we would get them out, but it's certainly something worth looking at. We can buy cheaper. It would be a benefit to residents. It's how we manage that. Could we put it through our network of small retailers? They buy them off at a cost and make a small profit, which keeps their community shops open. That may be something that we can look at going forward as well. Happy to do that.
Thank you. That's a very good suggestion, and that's a good one to follow up. So,
on the recycling question, sorry, Councillor, when you reach the high 60s, it's been shown that there's a plateau, and it just plateaus across. The drop in 2017-18 was slightly to a change in wood waste definition, so that brought us down a bit. But when you're up in those high 60s, getting towards 70, it's a plateau until we take another major step forward. We're going to have years now of plateauing around that sort of level. So until we take a next big step, monthly collections, 6 weekly collections of residual, those kind of things to drive it up again, we're probably going to be around this level. At this moment, we're in front of the target. We're in a very good place. So yeah, we've got before we take the next big step and the next big decision. Yeah.
Yes, and I think, you know, I for one are very appreciative of how fortunate we are to have the frequency of collections that we have in our county, especially when you look at, you know, the challenges we've had with our budgets when other councils in Wales are certainly collecting. I mean, I think Newport collects every 3 weeks, doesn't it? So, you know, we really have done well to protect these services. Are there any other questions on this particular area before we look at fly tipping?
With the cost of bags, going back to that again, is it the printing on the bags? That must add to the cost of producing them, because that's just one thing. Also, you do wonder about sponsorship, whether somebody might like to sponsor our bags. But what does intrigue me, Chairman, I hate people like me, where does all this rubbish come from? I mean, I live a normal life, I think, and I don't have...
It's obviously abnormal.
Is it? I just do not understand, if people are taking out all the things that can be recycled, what the heck are you left with? Personal items, yes, that's something that obviously nappies and such. But for the rest, I honestly am intrigued as to what people chuck out. Anyway, that's me. Printing costs and whatever. What I was going to suggest, Chairman, might be interesting for members to look at next door's recycling system. Your predecessors in Torfine, the way that they are segregating things now. They've got they've spent a lot of money on that. And I was watching the other day, people were absolutely astounded when they were asked to put their black bags on a table so that they could be inspected before they could chuck it out. I think that was really concentrating some folks' minds. So, and also to visit Llanfoyt, because I presume we all know what our sites look like. I know them all, but, you know, just to actually see what other authorities actually have been able to provide. And yesterday in Newport, I don't think I've ever come across, well, it's a filthy mess in one area, and I don't think we have anything like that in Monmouth anyway.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smith.
Please ask, do we have a skip at Llanfoyt to collect medical appliances? For example, crutches, wheelchairs, whatever, which I have seen discarded in ordinary tip, and that is such a crying waste.
Yes, that's an appalling. When you think of the cost to the National Health Service of that, it's really worrying. Do you have an answer on that particular point?
Yeah, I'll take the cost of the bags. from memory, I think the cost of our rolls of red and purple bags work out about £1 per roll. We've chosen quite expensive. The thing with the red and purple bags is we've chosen colours which just seem to be expensive to produce. It's the dye of the... So actually, but the printing, I think, is pence per 1,000 when you work out the prices. I've never inquired about the cost of completely unprinted black type bags, but I'd say they'd be significantly cheaper than the red and purple, because we just seem to have picked two colours which seem to be more, the dyes are more expensive. So.
Okay. Any other questions on the general collections policy? Can I just make one comment? The only thing, and I mean, obviously members have raised some very valid points this morning, but the only thing that slightly concerns me is that under resource implication, there's no resource implications to implementing these policies. I'm not sure that's right. I mean, I actually think that, we are going to have enforcement costs. We're going to have more administrative costs. For example, one of the things that we haven't really touched on assisted collections very much, but we're going to review those every 3 years. So, I don't know what's happening at the moment, but presumably that's going to cause more administration. And I know it's probably not easy for you to respond to that question now, but I think it is something we need to keep an eye on moving forward, just to make sure that, it's not costing us an exorbitant amount of money. I don't know. What do you think about that?
We've based this on a lot of the policies in here are what we currently do. We're trying to just formalise it. So we've been very broad with the thing that it isn't going to cost us any money. We know it's going to cost us more to bring in, but the benefits to us, we hope outweigh those costs. So the benefit of increased recycling, the benefit of not having to return for bags that are not presented and contaminated should help reduce some of them costs. The real costs of the assisted collections is in providing them. Finding a policy that looks at how we manage that better may help reduce some of those costs, because there is a real cost going forward as we all get older and all need that additional support on how we do it. So yes, there is definitely costs associated with this policy. Most of them should be negated by the benefits that this policy will bring, we hope.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification. So if we can now look at fly tipping policy and any amendments that members feel should be included here. Any questions on this aspect? Something that I have to deal with on a very regular basis in my ward. I'll kick off then just with a couple of things. I'm concerned about, that it's been raised about the red and the purple bags, and some fly tipping that we recovered from the Clydach Gorge was actually where somebody had ran out of black bags at home. They'd had a children's party, and instead of going and buying black bags, they just put everything in the purple and red, which they did have a supply of, and chucked them into the river. And we actually did recover those, and it's being followed up by the Environmental Health Department. So, that was a real issue. And in here it does say that we follow up fly tipping within 5 days. Well, that hasn't been my experience. I know I live right in the north of the county, but sometimes I have to really chase this up to get fly tipped waste picked up, and it is very worrying because some of this fly tipped waste can contain some quite nasty things, and they put animals and the public at risk who are out trying to enjoy the countryside and come across these things. So that really does worry me. And the other thing is, it does say in the policy that we follow up where people have reported the fly tip waste. Now, that really isn't happening as far as my experience is concerned. I mean, I've had a couple of cases recently, and I've got no idea what's happening. I had one resident who actually filmed a video of a lorry setting fire to fly-tipped waste recently, and this is a really big problem because when the summer comes, we're going to have real issues with people setting fire to this waste. And she actually took a video of it, and she said to me the other day, she actually works for Costains, and she said to me, Jane, what's happened about that? You know, I haven't heard. And I think, you know, we're getting the public on our side now. They're reporting these incidents, but we do really need to follow up and let them know what's happening, because then they can see real benefits to it's a big step to report this, because they're actually very worried about the implications and, you know, whether they're going to be at risk themselves for reporting it. So just a few points there on fly tipping.
Okay, within Monmouthshire, historically, the fly tipping enforcement side is dealt with by environmental health as opposed to waste. So the 5 days relate to what we have a statutory, or at least what we have a statutory target, is to go and collect the waste within 5 days. We struggle in some areas to get at the waste. Some of the ravines and quarries which are difficult to get the waste is much longer than that. We also have some issues with the types of waste that are dropped off. So if it's large amounts of asbestos or that type of material, we need to get contractors in, so they take slightly longer than our 5-day target. Most of the material is collected within 5 days. Through the My Council Services portal, if people report it through there, it should then give you an instant message saying thank you for reporting it. Then when we go and collect it, it'll give you another message telling you that it's been collected. If we don't go and collect it, or if we go and collect it and we get it and it's on private land, it should also message you that as well. So I'll look into that, why that isn't happening. We have had a few problems with our portal in not feeding back information, so we need to get better at that. In general, a lot of the areas we go to, we get there and it's on private land. We don't have the power to go onto that private land and clear it, but we have that public expectation that we will. And it's quite a difficult thing, because there is a lot of land owned, you know, particularly the Brecon Beacons area. It is public park land, not council land. We don't have to pick up that waste off their land. Sometimes we do because it's the right thing to do. Other times it's just too expensive to get down into those kinds of areas and collect it. What we need to do is get better at getting back to the resident and explaining this. We are setting up processes to try and get hold of the landowner, to inform them that there is an issue on their land. That's also not always easy in tracking down who the landowner is in certain areas. But it's one of the things that we want to build on going forward for this policy as well.
Thank you. And I the other thing, I mean, I went out and did some litter picking we're getting a local group in Clydach and Llanelli Hill, and I was absolutely shocked at the amount of rubbish that's been thrown down by the quarry and by the Grade 1 listed bridge, and it is absolutely terrible what's chucked down there. And there was a dead sheep in the Clydach, and I've emailed Natural Resources Wales, and what really concerns me is that they're not fulfilling their job in keeping these places clear of waste. And what actually is their responsibility, Natural Resources Wales, is concerned with waste in the watercourses? You know, I think this is one area that really needs following up, because they don't. Councillor Eason.
Yes, I sit on the Internal Drainage Board, where an NRW have that responsibility to making sure watercourses are clear. You then come up with the problem of where that rubbish got to go to. If you take it out of the watercourse and put it on the farmer's land, the farmer then becomes responsible for it. If you take it out of the watercourse and put it onto highways land, then the council becomes involved. This is a bigger problem in Newport than this for us, because they got more areas. But NRW, their first responsibility is to clear the waterway if it's there. Well, in the south of county, the drainage area. So that might be part of your answer. They should be there once you report it to remove it. But where it goes to is another question. I'm not sure whether they're responsible for taking it away.
Thank you for that, Councillor Easton. And it seems to me that they don't have the resources to fulfil this part of their job, which is really another conversation, I guess. But anyway, any other questions from members on fly tipping? Councillor Smith?
Notice that sort of under page 35, but basically there were 3 departments involved in trying to get things moving, and I thought that doesn't really help things, does it? You've got your environmental health department, the salvage company from the county council will deal with, and our highway department, so it's getting your act together. Can I just notify Carl or somebody if they'd like to log, because I've forgotten. Behind the cricket ground on Route 100, and I like the way he got the categories there, we have a pile of tyres if somebody could collect them sometime. And I also understand that to encourage people, we've got some notices that can be put up. This area is cleared by volunteers. Yes. She's got to have half a dozen, because there are people who work away and they're not part of any group. They just get out and do it. And it's nice if they can be acknowledged. It might help a little bit. And I did find interesting as well that the dead wild animals are not classed as fly tipping, and you leave them there to be disposed of by other wildlife. But it gets a bit pongy at times, doesn't it? So, yes. What I do feel is, is really hard, though, is when stuff is dumped over fences onto private land and people are lumbered. You've got a couple of fridges, deep freezers, and God knows what, that have just been thrown over, and you're suddenly responsible for dealing with those. So the sooner we can... How many times have we actually seen enforcement that's gone through within Monmouth in the last 12 months? How many cases of people have we identified and actually prosecuted and retrieved costs?
As I said, historically that work's done by environmental health, so they would have them figures. I don't have them figures to hand at the moment, Councillor.
I think that's a very valid point, and perhaps we could email Dave Jones and get a response that could be circulated to members, because certainly that's something that I would be very interested in as well. And I think it is sadly only by following these things up and prosecuting people that we are going to change behaviours. So are there any other questions, members, that anybody... Councillor Easton.
The question is for the recycling team. Getting Nanting in Caldecott reopened this week for public to move into. Have you leafleted those 25 properties? The old Brookside. They started moving in this week. They would need some information as to their collection times and not what. Probably the same as Netherton Way, but have you leafleted those 25 properties? It'd be useful if we did.
I think one of the Waste and Education teams has been down there. I'll check when I get back into the office. It's been flagged up. Generally, we don't go in and leaflet new developments. We put information with the developer in the sales house, and we drop boxes off and caddies and bags off to them and expect them to do that as they're selling the houses. And all the information should be on the council portal for those people to look when they've moved in. But it is an area that, you know, the development part is one of the policies that we've got to bottom out as well, and getting, not all of the developers are willing to stack some boxes in a brand new show home to give out to people as they sell their properties. But I'll make sure that area.
Well, these are MHA properties, are not affordable housing, social housing, 25. A lot of the residents come from Oakley Way. I want to make sure we don't get into a situation of having problems moved across. The people I met the other day, they're still dreaming because of the properties they've got that they moved into. So I'd hate to have any fly tipping up there because it's close to the woodland, but we just need to move on. Thank you.
We'll get leaflets dropped off there, and let's start to encourage better behaviour from the start, isn't it? Yeah, let's do it right. Yeah, okay.
Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we've talked about final versions of this. When it is finalised, how and where will it be disseminated? Will it be just one-stop shops that people can go in, or will every resident or every household have a copy? How will it work?
Social media and the press?
Yeah.
Sorry, Madam Chair. I would imagine through the press, social media. Yeah, well, yes, it is. And aspects like that, we can circulate to community and town councils to raise member awareness, and just generally use those avenues to advertise.
And copies in one-stop shops.
Yeah, yeah.
I think you've raised a very important point, though, because given that we are going to be enforcing this, and we're going to be putting stickers on bags, and if that bag isn't has got contaminated waste, it's the responsibility then of the householder to take it down to the recycling centre and to dispose of it themselves. That does really need to be clearly communicated so that people are aware of what our side of the bargain is, and equally what their side of it is, because I think there isn't perhaps an understanding amongst the public of how expensive it is to dispose of waste, and how we can't have this attitude moving forward, that we can just leave it up to somebody else. We have to have the responsibility ourselves. So, I would really like to see a similar exercise personally as the one we've had, because I thought the leaflets that went out were very, very good actually recently.
Can I come back on that one? Once we've got it finalised, maybe, it should be on a council, it will be on a council agenda, and all us 43 members should know exactly what's going on. The sort of place to make sure we all know is at a full council meeting. So a part of an agenda, I think, should be for you to come along and say, this is the policy, get it out there to your people. If you could do that, I think that would be good.
That's a very good point. So, Councillor Eason.
Yeah, just one brief point. I find that some residents may not have they may have certain issues, personal issues, whereby they don't understand recycling. All they understand is something goes into a bag. I've spoken to about some individuals who social services need to be involved with helping these sort of residents to be able to recycle. There's one guy, I take his stuff home and sort it out because he just doesn't seem to understand what it's all about. There may be 2 or 3 of those in an area where it does cause a problem. So I spoke to you about one, Carl, and I hope we've done a deal with it. But it's an issue, isn't it? I don't know if you find it in your flats in Abergavenny.
Thank you very much for that very important point, Councillor Eason. So, unless there's any other questions, I think it's been a really worthwhile session on this, and thank you all very much for your contributions. There's been so many, I won't go through them all now. I think one of the most important points that was made was concerning community councils and how really moving forward we're going to involve them in future allocation of bags, etc. I think that is really important, and that needs to be, they need to be involved in that decision making as well. So thank you very much indeed, Carl and Laura and Roger, for being with us this morning. And we now have the recommendations, which are to review 2.1 to 2.4. So are we all happy with those recommendations as they are laid out there? Do you want me to take them one at a time, or are you happy to take them all together? Take them all together? Yeah?
What are you asking, Chairman, that is a honing of the proposals, and possibly abbreviating in some ways, and coming back again for members to actually give a final tick? We could incorporate the community councils in that then. Yeah,
so you're putting a recommendation forward that this comes back to this committee once we've had time for the feedback from this rollout that we've had on March the 4th, and the lessons that we've learnt from that, and also that we can then, as you say, do a more succinct report, and also taking into all the other points that have been made by members around community councils, etc. Is everybody happy with that?
Can we look at 2.4? I okay with 2.1, 2 and 3, but 2.4, to recommend timescales. Are we, as a committee, considerate of putting a timescale forward that we want to come back? Is it 12 months, 6 months, or what does the committee feel about the timescale for following these policies through?
Yeah, can you, Roger? What is the strategy around this?
Chairman, if I'm reading members correctly, we would suggest an amendment to the recommendations that the revised policies return to strong communities for confirmation, and it then goes forward. We had thought to go to the cabinet member. Now, not based upon Councillor Harris's comments, it might be something which you'd wish to take to council to increase awareness around it for a decision. So I think that's with the chairman's approval, then that's something which we can arrange. In terms of when you want to bring a policy back, I believe Cabinet approved the concept of bringing things back every 12 months for review. And we could do that. We could put that into the timetable for the select committee for that policy to come back in 12 months, and for you to us to offer you feedback on what has or hasn't happened, and for actually members to do the same. So that could be included within the recommendations when ultimately they go to council. The point you make about town and community councils, my understanding was to ensure that they're involved with raising awareness and that they be advised of what the policy is. Yeah. Not that we enter into consultation with each town and community council. Thank you very much, members. So I would suggest that we approach it on that basis, if I've read members correctly.
So, Carl.
And yes, to bring it back in 12 months after the policy's gone through, we are quite keen to move this forward from our side as well. Within the next 2 to 3 months, we will have reviewed, and hopefully we could bring it back to the Strong Community Select sooner than that for your viewpoint, so that we can then take it to full council.
Yeah, because it's my understanding that we want it come here, because this is very much a draft today, but obviously it is such an important issue to all our members and to our communities that it does go to full council for approval. Yeah, so is everybody happy with that?
It will come back to us in 2 months, 3 months here with all the snags that you've sorted out in that time, with bits and pieces we've incorporated here, and then we can recommend it on to it goes to full council. Yeah.
Are you hoping it goes to full council in June, or before the summer recess it needs to go to full council?
Ideally, so we could bring this back to your group in April, because we will have started to settle down then and know what we need to do about this collection.
Yeah.
Okay, you happy with that, Roger? Okay, is everybody in? Can I have a show of hands that everybody's in agreement with that? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. And we now move on to agenda item 5, which is to confirm the minutes of the previous meetings. So first of all, we'll look at the meeting which took place on the 31st of January. So are there any changes or action points that anybody would like to raise from that meeting?
I sent my apologies for that meeting. No, I wasn't. I was there. We haven't got the head of operations down on the list of attending officers, and unless I'm reading things doubly, am I?
Well, sorry, what was that?
Head of operations attended the meeting on 31st of January.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
wasn't here,
thank you.
so-
Thank you very much for that,
No,
Councillor
that's all
Smith.
Right.
Okay, so I'll take it page by page. So page 1, page 2,
Is this just for comment, Chairman?
yeah,
I really do hope we get that speed management policy moving sometime.
I couldn't agree more. Do we have an update on the problem that we've had is because Hazel unfortunately has not been well and she's been off.
She's not been well, but now she's on leave. So
She's on leave.
I think next week.
We're not totally up to date with our action list, so we really need to get that together back on track. Okay, so page 1, page 2, page 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
I've got car parking charges, Chairman, because I'm just wondering, could I ask, please, have we, I suppose it's somewhere on the website or whatever, we have got a parking policy now, have we? Our car parking charges and everything is up to date somewhere on our website?
I think
It's ongoing?
I would hope that is the case because, I mean, obviously this has all been approved as part of the budget. But if you could get that clarified for members, I think that's a very good point you raised there, Councillor Smith.
Because I've never actually... Thank you.
Good point, and we'll come back to members on that. And the last page. So could I have a proposer and a seconder for these? Councillor Webb, seconded by Councillor Eason. All in favour? Thank you. So the other meeting that we had was concerning the toilet strategy. And just to let members know that I am meeting in Abergavenny tomorrow with Dave Jones and Tony Crowhurst to actually look at the physical implications of the disabled toilet policy that he sent round. So we're meeting up to actually put it to the test, and obviously I'll let members know how we get on with that as part of that toilet strategy. Councillor Smith?
Yeah, if I can, Chairman, sorry for missing that meeting. When I was involved in the previous report, it was quite interesting and amusing and entertaining. I actually found the visits that yourself and Councillor Webb and myself made to those really depressing. I truly did. I didn't enjoy the day at all. Strange to say. No, it was good. It was good company, but I just looked at a system that hadn't improved after all those years and recommendations and thinkings. And I think within Monmouthshire there's a failure to recognise the impact of the toilet facilities on visitors to Monmouth. The actual impact is not recognised. People will remember Monmouth, particularly the toilets by the tunnels going into Monmouth. They're not our responsibility, they're the Welsh Government. They are disgusting, quite frankly. And if this is the image that visitors coming down the A449, stopping there to use that facility, will have of Monmouthshire. So I think it's very sad. So I think looking forward at a strategy, we should aim for a progressive funded strategy and provide facilities that are appropriate to the 21st century, because what we're providing now is inadequate. And an interesting thing happened during this week. I went on that visit to look at the developments around Wembley, and we stopped at a service station, and I don't know which one it was, but they had completely revamped their provision there. They had provided completely new setup, and we're proud to announce the expenditure that they'd undertaken. They were saving water, they were saving electricity, it was more hygienic, it was 21st century. And this is what we should be looking at doing. I'm sure the officers will be able to tell you where the facilities were, but they certainly, the use of water particularly, I mean, there's now a concern that coming to the future, we're not going to have enough water. Yeah. So, you know, all these things have been incorporated into that scheme. We've got a clean, hygienic system. It was a wholly different setup to what we're providing in Monmouth, and we've got to face reality.
And I think that that is exactly what we, and Councillor Webb and then Councillor Easton, I would just like to, and then Councillor Harris, that is what the committee conclusion was, that we actually, concerns were raised around the lack of investment, and I would totally agree with you. Councillor Webb, and then Councillor Easton, then Councillor Harris.
Just one point from the minutes. I just really, really want to make sure that that £17,200 is ring-fenced and that we have an input into the way that is used. I don't want that to be overlooked. You know what I'm talking about?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, the money that's the money that's coming to us, and that it just doesn't go into the ether and we don't see it, but it's actually used.
Have input into the use of it, please.
Can that be noted? That's the sum of money that's being provided by Welsh Government towards the upkeep of the toilets. Councillor Easton?
Yeah. Well, one comment and a question. Regarding the comment that Val made regarding the toilets on the A449, my understanding, is it A40 by there? A40 by there, sorry. My understanding, it came to various committees that Richard John got involved in this because his ward, and the word from the Welsh Government, they're going to be demolished. Well, if that's the case, demolish them. It'll take away that eyesore, because they do say that there's facilities further on down on the services, whilst at the same time people did want a picnic area. So either refurbish them or get rid of them. They are an eyesore. And the second point is, regarding the Gwent Police recommended that facilities don't remain open too long because of drug taking, etc. Cleaning staff have a very difficult job and will start logging issues related to syringe use to support the police. Has that been implemented? Because I do talk to the cleaner who was around, and I got the feeling it hasn't been implemented, but I do encourage you to let us know.
Certainly when we spoke to Jan on the day, she said that they were having to record, it was Jan, wasn't it? That they were having to record the, date and time and etc. when they had to, pick up these sharps. So I think if we can perhaps write to Jan and ask her if that particular policy is in place, and also some feedback on the frequency that these things are being collected.
I think she's on the sick.
I'm seeing him tomorrow in Abergavenny, so if we put a list together, I'll raise them with him tomorrow. And
sorry to interrupt you, but if you could just mention the blue light system and that as well, thank you.
These are all action points that needed to be put together following this last meeting.
Because one thing I felt really disappointed with, when we did that first review, those years and years ago, one of the recommendations was that any retail outlets opening, planning permissions, should require the outlet to provide, public facilities, toilet facilities. And we patently haven't adhered to that, because I can give you an example beautifully. It was rather distressing, actually, to watch somebody in Aldi, in Abergavenny. They have no provision there whatsoever for their customers. And I watched an individual sort of quietly asking and being told, no, no, no. And I'm sorry, that's a store that won't get my business anymore. But there we had a recommendation from that report, didn't we, Anne, that future planning applications should incorporate. Presumably Morrison's have made a very good job of it, but Aldi, no.
I don't think any Aldis or Morrison or Lidl's have toilets. There is one directly opposite Aldis in Abergavenny. So.
Okay, well, thank you for that. But point noted. Councillor Easton?
Just one I hadn't picked up, but I have noticed, regarding the ones in the Caldecott Countryside Park, which you commented on, where they got charging points are no good for anybody. that toilet does need sorting. Could we push this? It's owned by Countryside, I understand, or wherever it may be at the moment, and they need to do something there. Just
I mean, as a follow-up from our meeting, it's my understanding that a great deal of work is taking place following our scrutiny to bring these places up to standard, because I mean, I think there were bits of wood actually falling off the back of that toilet in Caldecott. It was and bare wires in another one, and these are all basic things that need to be brought up, and that piece of work is being done because they have been badly neglected, which is what we saw on the day. And you know, as you say, Val, not only are they an eyesore, but they're actually dangerous as well from a health and safety point of view.
I've got a picture of a young Anne Webb when she made these comments 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's the frustrating aspect. Okay, fine. So is everybody happy for me to sign? Sorry, Councillor Harris.
Two things. One, I wasn't at the meeting, and I'm almost certain that I would have put my apologies in, because I'm normally quite good at that. Now, interestingly, there was nobody from Abergavenny, unfortunately. As I say, I couldn't be here. And on page 3 of the minutes, there are various comments on Abergavenny that need a bit of explanation. For example, with regard to Abergavenny, it was considered that perhaps the council had failed to encourage the town council to take on some responsibility, which had resulted in the response to the survey for that area. Can I have a little bit of clarity on that, and then I'll explain what actually the town council are doing?
I think really that was a comment made because overall the response to the survey wasn't that brilliant, and I have to say I actually responded myself, and it was a very long-winded form which had been provided by Welsh Government, which I think a lot of people would have started filling it in and then would have lost the will to live. But I understand that Abergavenny Town Council did their own document, put their own document out, which probably, and I think I saw the figures for that, and it did have a much better response rate because they'd actually done their own. So perhaps you'd like that clarified in there, would you?
Well, yes. Not being here, if I had been here, the inference with this is that the Abergavenny Town Council is telling the County Council to get on their bike regarding toilet facilities. And it's important to note that for years, the Town Council has been putting in about £70,000 a year to keep those toilets open. And it's been mentioned before that the toilets throughout the county are in a terrible state, and that's because we haven't put any money in. There's one particular toilet in Abergavenny, the White Horse Lane, that is an absolute
Hanging Gardens of Babylon, we called it.
Absolute disgrace, and even the police want it shut down. And we, as a town council, again, have been trying for years to get figures from the county council as to what it will cost to, A, put it into usable condition, or B, knock the blooming thing down. So it is important that that would have been mentioned strongly if I'd been here. The town council has really put a lot of resources in to keep the toilets open in Abergavenny.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Smith?
Coming back to that one, because from the original report, the proposal was good provision, main points of arrival. Those were particularly discussing then, and that they should be closed.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there was quite a lot of... there was a member who was particularly keen to keep those toilets open, which sort of it was a little difficult to cope with. But then there was a survey done which actually showed there was a lot of usage for that. But I think our hopes were then, or mine were, that with the development of the supermarket, there would be good provision there, and then that would obviate the need for
We've got
those.
Morrison's
but they're still there, and as we say, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, the growth coming in, it's quite a feature.
Thank you very much. I think if we need to have some clarity on this, and I think if we could, write those points to Dave Jones and really find out what's happening with the future of that particular facility, because, we can't go on like we are. And perhaps it would, I think that this whole piece of work, I'm sure that they are coming back to this committee at a future date because they're working on it at the moment. So I think that's something that will be on our forward work programme in the near future. And I'll certainly make sure that it is.
I know the final strategy is on the work programme for May.
Thanks. I think the important thing was, we're live streaming, and I just like the great general public out there to know that we are deeply concerned and with the toilets in Abergavenny and as a town council, it is being strongly looked at.
Yes, thank you very much for making those points, Councillor Harris, well made. So is everybody happy, taking into account all the comments that have been made by members, that I sign these minutes as a true and accurate record? That's Councillor Webb and Councillor Dimmer. Can everybody in favour? Yeah. Thank you very much, members. Okay, so I think we've discussed our action list. I'm still very concerned that when I first became chair of this committee, I did suggest that we have slavery and modern day trafficking on the agenda. And, since that time, nearly 2 years ago now, we've had even more information this week about what's happening, and it is happening here. So I still feel that we need that topic to come to us because it is a real issue and a real problem throughout the country, including in Monmouthshire, I'm afraid. So, and obviously we've discussed the toilet strategy that needs to come back here, and also the waste, that we would like to have a look at that document before it goes to full council and for approval, the waste document that we've discussed today. Is there anything else that members feel they'd like to see on the forward plan? Councillor Eason?
It's just a comment about this morning's meeting. I think it's very productive. We had one item to discuss and we didn't rush it through as we normally find. We got a packed agenda, we don't get the right points in. I think we've touched on everything we need to touch this morning. I think it's a good agenda.
Yes, I totally agree with you, and I think that it is such an important subject that we've been able to give it the time that it deserved today.
I've just heard back from Roger Hoggins in response to Councillor Smith's query about the car parking policy. So, in terms of there being a policy on the website, no, there isn't. And the only way to get the information is to trace it through decisions made through Cabinet or reports. So, I'll make a point that you want something more substantial on the website, so I can put that forward.
Yes, please. If somebody could bring that together into one document, it would be useful for everybody.
So that's a very well made point. And you also would like to see burials and cremations, which is a very pressing issue as well.
It's an issue of social justice with that as well.
Pardon?
Social justice and all sorts of things come into that. I'm slow on this uptake. Is anybody interested in working on that?
Councillor Webb, did you have a point?
My original proposal was that, thinking was that in actual fact the council could help constructively at a very distressing time for people, but it needs the foundations, it needs to work on establishing how charges are done.
I think also it's something that central government need to, and I know they are looking into it at the moment. There is a paper going through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all right. money, whatever, what are alternatives, if any, what could we do as a council to help, and also, do we have a conflict of interest?
Okay, thank you. So I think we've got anything else that needs to go on the forward work plan, members? Anything else? If you do think of something you'd like to go on the forward plan, if you could let us know. So if I can, obviously the Cabinet and Council Forward Work Programme, that we take as read. Anybody has any comments to make on that before we move on?
Just revise my memory and then go back through it.
And then if we can just confirm the date and time of the next meeting, which will be Thursday, the 18th of April at 10 o'clock. And can I thank all members for their very, constructive comments and questions this morning. I think the meeting's gone very well. And I think we have had real input into this policy and what the next draft will be. So thank you all very much indeed. And thank you for your help today. The meeting is now closed.
It's down to the excellent chairman and support service.